to the Independent Musician. Our weekly podcast will focus on the independent artist and the music market at large. You'll hear from those artists as well as music execs, tech experts, and marketing leaders from around the globe. We'll discuss what it takes to make it in the biz and how you can overcome obstacles as you progress your craft, all the while making it interesting and fun. Now, here's your host, Mark Skoda.
Mark Skoda with the Independent Musician, and I'm real excited today to bring you a guest from all the way across the ocean there in the UK, Mr. Alex Holbourn, who's going to talk about his project. It's very, very cool, and I will explain to you shortly about what that means. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us, because I was intrigued when we hooked up for the possibility of doing this podcast and your project NIL, which basically is dealing with black metal. I did some research because, frankly, I didn't know what black metal was initially. I just recently in the Iron Gate Records started a metal genre for new artists, and we're signing at least 2 new artists this month. Yeah. But I thought it was pretty cool because as I listened to your project, your album, and then I understood clearly, the Nordic origins of the melodic elements, and then, of course, what I'll call the traditional, for lack of a better word, scream metal in the lyrics, but really a concept album of sorts. Can you tell us a little bit about black metal generally and how that came to be and how you got interested in it?
Sure, yeah. Well, as you say, black metal, the kind of hotbed of black metal has always been the Nordic countries, Scandinavia, and that's where the majority of the sort of legendary black metal bands are from. And there are certain kind of myths around black metal that everyone involved is a Satanist or whatever, but it's really just kind of like you say, a mix of Nordic culture and heavy metal culture, and initially you can argue there was some punk influence as well. I mean, there's a band from here in the UK called Venom. I'm not sure if you're
oh yes, yep.
So they were kind of contemporaries or just after Motorhead. They were often billed as kind of the new Motorhead. And their records found their way over to Norway and got in the hands of maladjusted young gentlemen over there, who then started the first black metal bands like Mayhem and all those guys. And Venom played with a lot of satanic imagery on stage. In particular, they were very theatrical, and though they didn't have the musical elements that you were talking about, like the Nordic elements and stuff like that, they were kind of the patient zero of black metal, if you like. And then the Nordic element obviously came from that sound becoming really popular over in Norway and Scandinavian countries. So it does have a rich sort of musical history behind it.
I'm saying it is interesting because you're right. It sort of has morphed in terms of meaning and expanded the genre. But I was going back in my research and looking at some of the music, and it is interesting, as I said, because there's a melodic undercurrent that much metal doesn't have. Right? I mean, there's tends to be in certain metal genres, thrash guitar, I call it, and just banging it at double bass drums and everything else. But this was kind of cool because it overlays that I call the traditional scream metal over those elements of melody that perhaps were influenced by the Nordic countries and their culture. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's good that you can, as someone who's like yourself, who's not really into black metal, it's good that you can hear those melodic elements in it, because a lot of people, like you say, they hear the screaming and they hear the distorted guitars and the thrashing drums, and they just think, do you know what I mean?
Right.
But there is a melodic aspect to it, and that's often people who are interested in metal but don't know much about it will ask me, what is the difference between black metal and death metal? And the answer is, to me, if you're going to be very simple about it, is black metal is melodic based and death metal is rhythmically based. So with death metal, there is melodic death metal, but generally speaking, you don't tend to get as much of a melodic component to it. In this record, we have, choir segments, we have piano, we have synth, strings, stuff like that. I mean, these are things that you wouldn't generally find in other genres of metal. So it's an extreme form of music with a kind of beautiful undercurrent to it
Yeah, no,
melody, you know.
that's exactly right. As I listened to the album, and the one song I do want to introduce to the audience a little bit later is the Stonebreaker, which I particularly
Right.
liked from the cuts that I read that I
Oh,
listened
great.
to. That was pretty cool. So we'll take that and play that a little bit later for the audience so they can get a sense of what that's about.
Yeah.
Because it was very clear to me in listening to that particular compilation that Stonebreaker was exactly what I'm talking about. I felt both sides of that sort of genre, right?
Yeah.
And I particularly like that one as well. So I'll play a little bit later. But now NIL is the group or your project individually. I know that you play with some other folks, I believe you mentioned in your bio.
Yeah.
Tell me about the project and you individually. Where's your music education? Where'd you come out of? Those sorts of
Okay.
things would be very interesting for the audience, particularly in the UK.
Yeah. Okay. So NIL is my project basically. It's basically a one-man project, but I kind of draft in other musicians to help, like a drummer and stuff like that. And Castle of the Winds, who were the other band on this split, Sons of Tyranny, that's a one-man project as well. That's a guy called Matthew, who I've known for God, I mean, I'm 37 now. I think I've known him since I was 15, so over 20 years. And we both have a kind of a long history in the local metal scene in Liverpool, which I suppose international listeners will know almost nothing about. But the Liverpool music scene obviously has always been a very big thing. And there is a strong metal scene over here and always has been. You know, you go back to the early 90s, you got bands like Carcass and Anathema and stuff coming out of Liverpool. And I think even today there's what we're doing. There's a lot of other black metal artists who aren't necessarily gigging, but are putting a lot of interesting stuff out. So yeah, we both have gigged for, the last kind of 20 years in Liverpool and around the UK, and Matty around Europe and stuff like that. Yeah, we both just always loved kind of the classic black metal bands. And he approached me a couple of years ago and said, "Do you fancy producing a couple of tracks for us?" And I said, "Well, why don't we do something together instead?" And the end result was this split, which we've completely self-funded and produced and everything, and now it's out there. So it's been a long road, but yeah, it's good. It's good to have it out there.
Yeah, let me ask you. Obviously, as it relates to the music itself, I did know. So you're basically is this the first album project that you've done? And as you point out, I mean, this is a particularly interesting subgenre because, in fact, even in this country, the metal fan is absolutely rabid for the bands they
Yeah,
follow.
absolutely.
I think, and it's kind of interesting because beyond the actual music and sort of the headbanging that goes on in some of the elements, there is it goes back to, in my opinion, harkens back to rock when rock was the antithesis of sort of the man, right? And so
Yeah,
metal still has that element that is anti conformity, right?
yeah,
And so, and then of course there's the elements of the look and feel because metal bands have some of the best damn merchandise you can buy, and people
yeah,
love it and go crazy for it. So, if you're following a particular band or a particular element of metal, you're sort of the cool kid in school, but nobody knows that because you're within that cadre of people and fans that particularly embrace that type of music, and it's very, very neat. That's one of the reasons we decided to create a metal genre within our record label, Iron Gate Records, because I
yeah.
felt, let's honor some of these very good musicians that maybe isn't everybody's cup of tea, but definitely drinks a lot of coffee.
Yeah. Well, that applies to I think the fans and the artists in metal as well. There's this incredible passion for what they do, and there's this kind of knowledge that you're never going to be like a household name, but you know that if you get your music out there, those who are into it will be really into it and will follow you all the way, like you say. So yeah, that kind of passion has always been there in metal, and that's why it's never really gone away as a subculture and as a genre. It changes a lot, but it's always there.
Let me ask you, as it relates to your own background in music, obviously you say you've been playing for about 20 years, and
Yeah.
I'm interested to find out where you came from in terms of, did you have formal music education? Are you a formally educated producer? Did you just come up to music because you love it? Tell us a little about
Okay.
that.
So I started playing guitar when I was about 15, and luckily there was like I say, the thriving local scene, particularly back then with an emphasis on bringing youth bands through. So there was a venue called the Flying Picket that we used to play a lot. They had these dry bar gigs on, which were basically by kids for kids sort of thing.
Right.
And we used to play those, and it was a great time to sort of come up. And then we grew up, got established, and yeah. I've personally I've never had any classical training. I was just really driven to play guitar sort of 24 hours a day. When I got the absolute bug for it when I started playing it, and that very quickly resulted in me moving on to starting my first band, which was called Obsolete. And we were together for about 5 years. And I've just never really, I haven't always been making metal music. This is my first metal project for a while, but
Wow.
I've always carried on making music and putting stuff out either for myself or other artists. So yeah, I mean, this project was particularly special to me because it's kind of like coming back to, well, me and my friend Matthew coming back to our roots really, and coming back to the stuff that we used to listen to back then and putting our own version of that out. So yeah, it's been my favorite project that I've been involved in, I think.
So as it relates to obviously Liverpool, there's always been a thriving music scene back there. Of course, everybody knows the Fab Four coming out of
Mm-hmm.
Liverpool years ago now. Hard to believe, isn't it, that it's now over 60 years ago?
Yeah,
But
very hard
I,
to believe.
yeah, it's just I've been around for most of that. I'll tell you a quick story. The first time I heard the Beatles, as we're talking about for those of you too young to know, the band came out of Liverpool, and I remember in the States they were supposed to release a different song, and instead, apparently a U.S. New York-based DJ started playing "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and that sort of blew up on the radio here. Well, back
Right,
then, this was I think 1963, if I'm not mistaken. I would lay in bed to hear that song, and we used to have what were called crystal radios. I don't even know what those are, but basically it was a series of transistors, and you had a alligator clip that you put on a piece of metal, which generated a current, and then you had a long wire that you basically put out your window, and you could listen to radio stations. Of course, back then it was all AM, and we had
wow.
50,000-watt AM stations in Cleveland, Ohio, where I grew up. And I'll never forget, late at night, I'm waiting for that song to come on, and it was the point at which I fell in love with music generally, and specifically, rock and pop, and but rock most of all, because coming up in Cleveland, you had a lot of rock bands. So
Yeah,
it's amazing how music influences you in your life, and sort of has those same little moments when you discover the aha, if you will, of groups like that who were just preceding the British invasion of America, and it was very
yeah.
cool. So very, very cool.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, that's before my time, but it's great to hear about that, and particularly as a Liverpool guy, I love hearing about the story of the Beatles, making it from being a gang of scruffy boys in Liverpool to being, international superstars in America, and how that happened and stuff. And yeah, that's always fascinating to me. But like you say, it's those moments in your youth that really ignite a passion for music. Like I remember I don't know if you know the band Muse. I think they're
No.
quite big in America, but early 2000s, I used to rush. There was this song called Newborn that they had that absolutely blew me away, and they used to show the video for it on MTV. And like you with the radio, I used to rush home from school to watch that video because I knew that would be the only time I got to hear it that day. And that song, in and of itself, made me start playing guitar and piano. So yeah, it's nice to hear about those little moments.
What do you do for a living to sort of support your drug called music?
Well, I do a lot of recording for other people and stuff, but it's not my main source of income. I'm kind of a copywriter by day. I write content for people and do websites and stuff like that. All very boring.
Yeah, well, the tech side is kind of fun.
Yeah.
My background is heavy technology. In fact, I acquired a company called 3R Designs, digital marketing services agency that we integrate into our services for our artists.
Right.
The amazing thing to me is how few artists use these technologies effectively for
Yes.
their fan base and or their music and or their band. I mean, a lot of people don't understand that it's about managing the brand, not the band. And
Mm.
the music today, when we look at places like Spotify, I've mentioned this before on previous podcasts, there's 184 million songs out there
Yeah.
on their catalog, and roughly 140 million of them have less than 1,000 streams, and almost 80 million of them have 0 to 10 streams. So,
Yeah.
you're not going to get discovered that way just to dump it out on a platform like Spotify. You've really got to work at it. And I think digital
Yeah.
marketing and integrating social media and email marketing and texting services, and of course your website, which is critical because the
Yeah.
ability to acquire new clients or new fans or new emails are values that you can maintain over time and build that super fan base that ultimately supports you as a band or you as an artist. I think those are critical things. And so it's interesting you actually do that for other people, and certainly will probably do that for yourself as well.
Yeah, I mean, the skills that I use in my kind of day job did come in really handy when I was putting this record together, because I mean, this record was as DIY as it gets. We, like I say, we self-funded and produced everything, but also I was tasked with, producing the album artwork and all that kind of stuff, which is something I hadn't done before. So all the skills around kind of, Photoshop and video editing and image editing and all that came into play as well. So it's good to have other skills that you can apply to music, because like you say, it's not just making the music. That's just the first step. You've got to get it out there and you've got to have it heard by people. So yeah, it's been a lot of hard work, but it's all worthwhile, I think.
Yeah, I think to your point is, like we use a lot of AI in our systems now, particularly
Mm-hmm.
because there are some tools that generate, photorealistic images. And if you're good at prompt engineering, specifically the ability to write a piece of, what I call English language code that creates a stellar result in AI, whether it's using chat or I use several other tools, a video creation tool and a image creation tool that just do some tremendous things that you can't do yourself. You couldn't pay somebody to draw this stuff anymore, and that's what's remarkable. And some of it, if you're really good at using the prompts, you can make them look just about as real as you can. I just found another piece of technology I've been working with called Flux, and
Mm.
I just am astounded. I'm astounded at the quality of the imaging, and it is to the point where if you use these tools as an artist, you can create not only the look and feel, but everything from your merchandising to promoting and the like. So it's pretty interesting there. And as you as a copywriter will well understand that AI, and particularly if you're good writing prompts and having coded in the past, I did that. You can actually generate entire articles, bios, books even, and I've done full business plans and catalogs and everything else on that. So it's pretty remarkable stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite anti AI myself, but I totally understand why people are tempted by it, and especially in the business world, but in the creative world, there's a lot of controversy at the moment. There was a band called Pestilence. I don't know if you've heard of them, American metal band.
Yep, yep.
Who recently used AI for their album cover, and got a lot of flack for that. But it was particularly bad AI as well. It was the kind of AI that you can see from a mile away. So
right. That's the point. You just can't say, make me an album cover.
yeah, exactly.
You've got to actually, I always tell people it's the same as coding in the old days, garbage in, garbage out. If you aren't a good writer, if you don't specifically illuminate for the AI tool what you want, then you're not going to get the result that you expect. And sometimes it takes several iterations to go through that. I find that I use it particularly for helping writing articles, blogs, and copywriting, as well as building out better biographies for artists where they maybe have 3 or 4 sentences. You can actually embellish that in a positive way with factual content and data. And interestingly, as a side note, I was reading one article and it related to about 1,000 people they surveyed in the UK, where they generated copyright by an individual human and copyright by the AI. And over 60% of the people preferred the AI copyright because it was more informative and clearer to understand. And of course, part of that is because they train this stuff with billions and billions and even trillions of data points. So
yeah, I mean, this is why it's if you're a traditional copywriter, it's very hard to get work at the moment.
that's the other problem I was going to suggest. You need to adopt this stuff so that you can do it faster, better, and use your skills as a copywriter to actually analyze the output and make the changes. That's what I do basically. You don't just copy and paste. I will tell you, just as a side note, a good story here in Nashville. We had when a very unfortunate shooting situation occurred, we had two college here. I won't even say who it was, but two of them wrote, quote unquote, a email, very, very, very harsh about what took place and about the people that own guns and things of that nature. But when they copied and pasted what was out of the input, one of the things that ChatGPT does at the very bottom, ChatGPT will say ChatGPT like the number 3.5 or 4.0, whatever. And they left that in there. So then they sent these emails out to all of their students, and they both were suspended, eventually fired for doing something like that. Very interesting stuff. But you're right, AI. I think what I will say this, AI to write music right now is crap. I mean, I've used a number of the tools just to test. I will say this though, AI can be very helpful if you have writer's block, right? If you have a series of let's say verses you want to create and you ask the AI to generate the rest of the verses, it will come up with that. You may not use that, right? But basically it helps you get over that writer's block or gives you other insights into maybe elements that you'd want to create. So it's a very good tool for artists generally, but they still have to have what I call high tech, high touch. They have to have the human element. And in particular, I mean, I know that AI ain't close to black metal yet. Okay. It's not going to be there.
I think black metal as a whole is very anti AI, and I was very keen on having no AI on this album whatsoever, and we didn't. So,
you guys you played all live instruments. Did you use any MIDI at all, or did you actually have people come in?
No, we had there was no MIDI involved. We did MIDI for the demos. That was about it. So we took the demos into a studio downtown called SAE. Yeah. And we hired a great engineer called Chris Hendrick who recorded the sessions for us. And we just traditional kind of, stack amps and the piano, the real piano. And Matty had this old Roland hardware synth from the 80s that he used on his stuff.
Very cool.
So it was, so I mean, I think that's the same kind of synth that the classic black metal bands back in the day would have been using. So it really kind of gave it that authentic touch, But no, there was no MIDI involved. It was all kind of all very traditional, really.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, I prefer that. That's one of the reasons I think some of the classic rock is still popular today because it was 3 mics in the band playing live, right? And absolutely. I mean, you look at you go back to some of the work that was done in the UK and Abbey Road Studios, and I mean, it was they had 8 tracks, right? They weren't did some overdubbing, but basically you had this organic element, right? You weren't on a click track all the time or at all. In fact, most of the time, they never had quantizing. I think the idea of music being more organic with slight imperfections, it has a different feel for people than the stuff that's been quantized. Now, having said that, everybody does that now. Everybody's using Melodyne. Everybody's using Autotune. And when I go to see a band that I've heard their music and they don't sound like that on stage, I know right away, this is not a real band. This is, a computerized band. So for me, it's important that music be live, music be alive. And, particularly done with real instruments. I think that makes a difference, particularly, in the music genre that you're dealing with. Let me ask you, who sings the vocals in this? Is it you or is it Matthew or both?
So on my stuff, it's mostly me, and then there's backing vocals from a guy called Chris as well.
Okay.
Chris also does backing vocals on Matty's, but most of the Castle of the Winds, that is. So most of the Castle of the Wind stuff is sung by Matty as well, and we had a kind of on the I think it's on the last track on the album. We had a makeshift choir, which was
Gallows
4 or
and
5 of us around the microphone. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, let's talk. I'm going to introduce the song Stonebreaker. This is on Sons of Tyranny. For our fans, by the way, you have to put bastards, son of tyranny. It's okay. Bastard, we understand that. We're not prudes here.
Okay. The title is Bastards Sons of Tyranny. I just didn't know whether you would be able to say that on there. But
we still have free speech here in America for a little bit longer. Tell me a little about the inspiration for Stonebreaker, and then we're going to play it through so that the audience can hear it.
Okay, so I mean, the concept of the album really is Bastards Sons of Tyranny. I mean, Matty's side of it, the Castle of the Wind side, is about this gang of outlaws called the Red Bandits, who kind of terrorized mid Wales in the 16th century, and he really kind of goes into detail of the lore of that, you know. And my side is more about kind of the people versus tyranny in general. So to be succinct about it, my side is about the people against tyranny, and Matty's side is about the people becoming tyrants in their own right. So that's kind of the concept behind the record, roughly speaking.
Yin and yang of the album, right?
Yeah.
Well, here's, folks, the Stonebreaker. If you don't know what black metal is, check it out. And we're going to play this from NIL. This is Alex's piece, and check it out. Here we go.
They will
Stonebreaker, folks. I hope you enjoyed that very interesting piece of music. Alex, thanks very much for sharing it with us. Obviously, I mentioned earlier about this whole melody underpinning the vocals, because it's really juxtaposed very clearly in that song, which I found interesting, by the way. If I and when I was listening through it the first time, listening to the vocals come through, you almost can separate it in your mind. If you want to just focus on the melody, you can do that, or the musicianship, I should say. And then there's sort of if you back away a little bit and you listen to the entire composition, it's very cool. So very, very much not everybody's cup of tea, but I really particularly enjoyed that song.
Well, thanks very much. Like you say, I think that's the best example on the record of the kind of the duality, if you like, of the melodic side of black metal and the screaming and everything. And I mean that initially started as an acoustic track, actually. So the opening riff is something that I'd written on a 12-string acoustic, and then I thought actually that would probably work well with a full band setup. So yeah, I like that. I like that song better than Crucified Tyrant, which is the opener. Myself, I'm glad that you like that as well. It's cool.
Yeah, it was good. It was actually a good listen. And I one of the things we try to do through these podcasts is sort of introduce people to not the standard stuff. And I was really grateful to have you come on board, in particular, with the type of music that you're producing. I also find it very interesting that many artists create the compositions themselves and then pull other artists in to actually do the full production. That's becoming more the norm today, because supporting full bands all the time, as you well recognize, I think, whether it's in Europe, the UK, or America generally, record labels, first of all, don't do that. Now, one of the reasons I formed Iron Gate Records was to support bands, because I think heyday when we had, you knew who the guitar player was, who the drummer was, you knew who the lead vocalist was, the bass player, and everybody know their names. And now, particularly with pop music, it's, sometimes 3 chords and a breakup, I call it, but I think people are beginning to recognize that bands are much more entertaining. Nobody goes to a concert to see somebody up on stage with a computer to press a button.
Yeah, no, I agree. And these are both one-man projects at the moment, but the plan is very much to evolve into a full band. But on this record, I played everything except the drums. I can't play drums to that standard. So we had to get a session drummer in. But yeah, I agree with you about bands. I mean, it's that's very much what I want NIL to turn into, is a band with with a set lineup that can kind of grow together.
Yeah, and I think you can. I mean, I had a young lady yesterday. We do a dinner show at a venue nearby here in Nashville that I manage and help put on various artists. She has a great vocal voice. She learned to play ukulele so she could accompany herself. She was a part of several bands, cover bands, primarily up in Maine, before she moved to Nashville a couple of years ago. She writes her own music. She's got a beautiful voice, great lyrics. But I said, if you could just add somebody even on a cajon and on a good acoustic, so they could actually accompany you, your voice is great. I said, if you add a little more fullness beyond, the ukulele itself, I said, that'd be fantastic. And I think, for me, sort of as I look at the art of music today, because, in the old days, this, you'd save your money up, $18, $20, $30 for an album, maybe 15 quid. You go buy that vinyl, and then you take it home, and you carefully take it out of the hermetically sealed album cover. You make sure you touch the top edges, you put it on your turntable, and then you listen to the entire damn album front to back, several times. Today, for that same roughly $20 a month, your whole family can listen to 184 million songs, and it has become disposable. But I think my humble opinion is that post-COVID, and we've seen this here in this country, particularly with touring artists and legacy acts and more venues opening up for live music. And I think people recognize that the what I call it re-socialization of music is so critical to people's enjoyment, right? It doesn't happen when you're listening on a radio. In fact, there's a great study I talk about oftentimes that when you're listening or even videoing people, you don't have the connection that you do when you're in a live situation. Oxytocin actually is the hormone that's secreted when you're
Yeah.
physically in a room together, even looking at each other. It's a bonding hormone. Of course, it's what women secrete enormously when their babies are born, bonding them to their child. But for human beings, generally, you have to be in the same vicinity room or hanging together,
Yeah.
shaking a hand or putting your arm around a shoulders, whatever. And it changes that. And of course, we see that in concerts all the time, right? I mean, particularly in the metal fans. I mean, they're out there
Yes.
just bopping along like crazy, just loving the beat, loving the music, and just feeling everything. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I just got back from a festival here in the UK called Bloodstock, which is like a pretty major metal festival, about 10,000 people. And
Wow.
I couldn't, it's the first time I'd been to that festival. I couldn't get over how friendly and how nice and how much of a sense of community there was. And it was just so nice to experience that, there's this really heavy raging music, but then you've got the juxtaposition of this lovely supportive community, and I think, yeah, the social aspect of music is so important, because I mean that's what it started as, is a communal experience, and that's what it, at its best, I think music still is a communal experience.
Yeah, I mean, either the artist in the old days, they came to you, they came to the community and played at the village, or the village came to the artist. That's how it worked. And,
Yeah,
recording's only been maybe 250 years. But I think at the end of the day, real music has to be experienced, in my humble opinion. Yes, we used to, of course, get the albums because we wanted to follow the band and, and listen to their
yeah,
music, and then hopefully get a ticket some point, or if we had a local music scene. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, which had a lot of rock bands virtually on every corner.
yeah,
And you could see somebody new almost every week someplace.
yeah,
It was an interesting time. I loved it. And, unfortunately today we don't have that because of the problem we just described earlier, which is bands can't make a living at that, right? So
yeah.
they're not getting paid in many cases, or they're getting paid nominal fees plus tips. And it's hard. It's just very, very
Yeah.
difficult.
I mean, it's quite, as someone who loves music and a musician, it's quite depressing when I see obviously Nashville is kind of a mecca of live music, but if you look at the local venues in Liverpool, the mid-sized venues, all of their listings are taken up by tribute bands, basically, which is not that reassuring, for
Oh, now
for
you raise
a young artist.
you raise a very important point, because it's all about putting butts in the seat, not discovering new artists. So these
Yeah,
tribute bands are becoming very successful. But again, they're playing somebody else's music. They're all live
yeah,
jukeboxes. And, one of the things I've done and trying to do with my artists is I want original music, because maybe they'll get discovered, maybe they won't. I do everything I can to help push them. But the fact of the matter is, we've got to move the entire genre, the entire musical market forward in
yeah,
terms of creating and performing new music. And I think the venues, we're seeing that somewhat here. Okay. We've got a place called the Vinyl Lounge. Very cool. I've got a showcase that I do there for Iron Gate Records. It's all originals. They'll throw a few covers in. The Starstruck Farm at the Grand Old Barn, we basically all do originals, although we will have some covers as well thrown in there. But we try to give artists and bands the opportunity to present their skills, their songs, and their original material, because I think that's how you discover new fans, and fans discover new bands. I don't
yeah.
know a better way to do that. And it's easy to follow somebody who plays like their Heart or Led Zeppelin. Okay, fine. I loved it. I grew up with that. Terrific. But there's nothing new about that. It's somebody else's catalog.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think community is so important around that. Artists who are under the radar, supporting each other, putting gigs on, having each other on each other's podcasts, that kind of thing is so important. And also the online community as well. Like we've released this album through Bandcamp, and I've found that to be a great platform for engaging with new fans and other artists and things like that. So I think it's a collaborative, communal effort that keeps it going all the time. And I think, like you say, at the moment, it's very hard to, unless you're, you know, on a major label, it's very hard to make money doing original material. But I kind of have faith that that won't always be the case. You know, I think the music industry will get back on its feet.
My son's a drummer. He has a band, and you know, he's not quote unquote making it, but he's 18, gonna be 19.
Yeah,
been playing since he's literally 4 years old. I mean, he took drum lessons in our church conservatory at that point. Greg Upchurch from Three Doors Down is his drum coach and now mentor. He's a drummer 3 Doors Down, so we know him very well. He actually co-founded the label with me. And I tend to agree with you. I think at some point in time, people are going to recognize the value of that creative process. And I think I call it not only the resocialization, but the hyper-localization of bands. You know, you didn't travel 500 miles. You went to every corner, quote unquote, bar or pub or venue to watch new music. That's how it was back in the day. And I think a lot of these venues are beginning to realize that, first of all, they can do better business if they put some very interesting artists in. Yeah. It doesn't always have to be covers. And we're seeing more of that pop up. And I, like you, believe that maybe over time that will be the case. Yeah. And, I think, and I'm hopeful that, particularly for my son, as he goes through his career, he's working full time to pay the bills and do the things he wants to do, but at the same time doing his music. So, he's got a full studio and production and all that good stuff.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's in the best possible place to do it. And that's
exactly right. Amen.
Yeah.
Alex, let me ask you, what are your social media that you can share with our audience that they can check out your material? And
sure.
I know you're
so we're on TikTok and Instagram at NIL Black Metal. That's NIL Black Metal. And we're also on Bandcamp. You can listen to the album in full on Bandcamp, which is nilblackmetal.bandcamp.com. And those are the only socials we have at the moment.
I know you're on Spotify as well.
That's right. Yeah, we're on Spotify and Apple Music and.
Right. The artist is NIL. And
NIL. If you search NIL or Castle of the Winds, either of those, it will come up here.
Well, that's terrific. Listen, I very much appreciate your time today. It's great, and
thank you, man.
Across the water there, and more importantly, introducing the audience and frankly me to a new metal genre. And if you get your band together, dude, I'd love to sign you to our label. We can, we're doing international work as well. So in fact, I'm working right now to try to get a band in Italy signed. They're pretty cool. So a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Well, we should definitely stay in touch.
We'll do that. Alex, thank you very much for your time today. And thanks for educating, as I like to say, our audience to a very fascinating genre and to your work. And folks, if you get a chance, please get out there and listen to NIL as the artist over on Spotify, and it's Bastards Sons of Tyranny is the album. So check it out. You want to find out what black metal is and understand a little bit about some very cool music, do that. This is Mark Skoda. Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us this week on The Independent Musician. Make sure to visit our website, IronGateRecordsRadio.com, where you can subscribe to the show on your favorite streaming platform so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in this podcast, we'd appreciate you giving us feedback or simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in next week for a new episode of The Independent Musician, where the independent musician is the star.